The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. In this true crime documentary, we will explore another one of the most shocking marriage betrayal stories, where a husband betrayed wife in a devastating way. The body of 29-year-old Rebecca Keller was found dead in a lavish mansion on a prestigious Fijian island in March 2013. What started off as an idyllic honeymoon descended into a terrifying catastrophe. The subsequent inquiry uncovered the horrific disintegration of Rebecca's marriage to her husband, 32-year-old Daniel Keller, a man whose rage and jealousy would result in unimaginable acts of violence. 3 years prior, in 2010, their journey started when a brief romance drew them into a relationship that appeared ideal on the surface but had deadly flaws. For the employees of a prestigious luxury resort in Fiji, the day started off like any other on March 10, 2013. The sky was a perfect shade of blue, the air was warm, and couples strolled hand in hand down the immaculate beaches. Before a 29-year-old newlywed who was staying in one of the resort's most secluded villas with her husband, Daniel, broke up the tranquility, the morning was picture perfect. Although their interactions occasionally suggested strain beneath the surface, the couple had been the talk of the staff. They were a beautiful couple who seemed to be genuinely in love. But the crew started to notice anything strange that morning. They had planned an opulent trip to highlight the best of the islands, but Daniel had failed to show up. No one picked up when the hotel concierge contacted their villa to see how the couple was doing. Rebecca was usually punctual and kind, so this was uncommon. To look into it, a housekeeper was dispatched to the estate. It was a terrifying scene inside. The body of Rebecca was found on the chilly marble floor in the bedroom. Her face was battered and swollen, and her forehead was covered with dried blood. The cuts indicated that her skull had been struck several times. Nearby was a broken bottle of champagne that was still bloody. The act's ferocity was made all the more startling by the stark juxtaposition of crimson with the villa's exquisite furniture and white linens. Rebecca's arms and torso were covered with bruises, some recent and some older, suggesting a history of violence that had gone unreported. The Fijian police were alerted right away by the staff, and they swiftly arrived and started their investigation. The plot was already taking shape with sad clarity by March 11, 2013. 32-year-old Daniel Keller was brought in for interrogation. His clothes were wrinkled and slightly soiled with what looked like blood, and he had been discovered slouched on a sofa in the living room of the property. He frequently attributed his mental state to heavy drinking and claimed to have no memory of the prior evening. Hotel employees confirmed that Daniel had, in fact, taken a heavy drink at the resort bar the night before. He was characterized by witnesses as anxious and combative, especially with Rebecca. Late into the night, the pair was spotted fighting at the bar. Employees remembered Rebecca's efforts to soothe Daniel, her calm, low voice contrasting with his piercing, angry tone. He had accused her of focusing too much on an elderly man who had been sitting close to their table. Rebecca comforted him, but Daniel seemed to become more irate. The dispute overflowed onto the resort's outside lounge area, where Daniel was seen violently seizing Rebecca by the arm as she attempted to leave, according to security footage that the police later examined. Despite being largely hidden by shadows in the poor video, her face appeared tense, and her body language was guarded. The inquiry turned up further information. Daniel started to have his claims of memory loss refuted by forensic evidence. His fingerprints were discovered on the bloody neck of the champagne bottle, which is thought to have been the weapon that killed Rebecca. Analysts saw that the bottle had broken due to the force of the strikes, leaving pieces lodged in Rebecca's injuries. The degree of violence was too great to be explained by an unintentional or intoxicated outburst. The villa itself provided more hints. Patterns of blood spatter suggested a struggle had occurred close to the bed. It's likely that Rebecca was trapped there with no way out. In sharp contrast to the tranquil vista of the ocean outside the villa's huge windows, a path of broken glass, a toppled lamp, and ripped linens implied turmoil. It was hard to overlook Daniel Keller's predicament by March 20, 2013. Crucial evidence was provided by CCTV footage taken the night of the event. Around midnight, it showed Daniel pulling Rebecca back to the villa, her head dropping as if she was trying to fight but lacked the power to do so. The pair had not reconciled when they returned together, according to witnesses in the pub. Shortly later, staff said they heard muffled shouting coming from the property, but no one had stepped in, thinking it was simply another argument. Fijian authorities officially accused Daniel Keller with Rebecca Keller's murder based on these pieces of evidence: the fingerprints, the CCTV footage, and the forensic results. The first step in determining the true events of that tragic night was his arrest. However, there were still unanswered issues even after he was placed under arrest. How could a honeymoon transform from a dream to a horror so fast? What had stoked the anger that led to this violent act? And what secrets might remain in the lives of the couple who appeared to be so ideal to the outer world? Somewhere among the evidence were the answers, just waiting to be discovered. The terrible truth of Rebecca Keller's passing, however, was all that was left for the time being. A tragedy that had permanently damaged her family, the resort employees, and the idyllic Fijian paradise. Whenever Rebecca Keller walked into a room, she had a radiant presence. She was the kind of lady who made an impression, not because she was attention-seeking, but because she exuded a creative and pleasant demeanor that put others at ease. Rebecca was a marketing executive who was passionate about her work and always full of fresh ideas. She thrived on interacting with people. According to her acquaintances, she was a dreamer who believed that there were endless possibilities in the world. It came as no surprise that she and Daniel Keller clicked right away when they met at a networking event 3 years prior. Daniel was an affable man who had a knack for leaving an impression. He was a prosperous and self-assured real estate entrepreneur who captivated everyone with his good looks and wit. His drive and his ability to make her feel important were what drew Rebecca in. They were soon inseparable. The whirlwind courtship, full of extravagant gestures and promises of eternity, felt to Rebecca like the love story she had always dreamed about. Although it wasn't always apparent, Daniel had a darker side. Beneath the charm, there were times when he lost his temper, frequently over the tiniest things, and it was piercing and unforgiving. He attempted to hide his intense jealousy with humor or justifications. Although not consistent, his drinking occasionally drove his emotions to risky heights. Rebecca fell completely in love with Daniel in spite of these warning signs. She ignored her mounting worries because she had faith in his and their combined abilities. She immediately answered yes when Daniel proposed to her in Paris under the Eiffel Tower's radiance. Like something from a love film, the moment was picture perfect. However, in the months that followed, flaws in their ostensibly ideal relationship started to appear. Instead of bringing happiness, the wedding preparations became a cause of stress. Daniel fought with Rebecca about insignificant things like seating maps and flower arrangements because he insisted on having control over even the tiniest details. Rebecca expressed her concerns about his domineering conduct to her close friends, although she frequently minimized them. She assured herself that it was simply the strain of organizing a large celebration and that after the wedding, everything will be better. And for a while, it did in some respects. Their wedding was a lavish event that left attendees in awe of their apparent love for one another. Rebecca held onto the hope that a fresh chapter was actually beginning. The strain that had hampered their involvement would no longer exist. Rebecca was giddy with anticipation on March 5, 2013, when they took off for Fiji. She was determined to make their honeymoon, the trip of a lifetime, one to remember. That dream appeared to be fulfilled in the initial days. Situated in a remote area of the island, the resort was breathtaking, featuring pristine waters and sunsets that adorned the sky with vibrant shades of pink and orange. Rebecca posted pictures of them exploring the island, having candlelight meals, and laughing on the beach on social media. The Kellers seemed like they were having the ideal honeymoon to everyone outside. The perfection, however, was a front. Tensions were seething under the surface. Later, resort employees recounted incidents that suggested trouble. Suddenly, Daniel's attitude may change, transforming what should have been lovely occasions into awkward, quiet meals or hushed disagreements. Rebecca was seen by witnesses attempting to soothe him during his outbursts by using a calming tone. As if she didn't want to cause a commotion, she always seemed to accept responsibility for any argument and dismiss it with a slight smile. By March 9, 2013, the fissures were more extensive. The couple spent that evening at the resort bar, a lively gathering place for honeymooners to mingle and exchange tales of their travels. Ever the social butterfly, Rebecca engaged an older man sitting close in light chat. It appeared to be a straightforward, friendly discussion to everyone seeing. Daniel, however, didn't think so. Already simmering beneath the surface, his jealousy exploded. The bar's vibe changed. As Daniel's voice became louder and his gestures more pointed, staff and guests were aware of the couple's stress. Leaning in close as if to keep their chat private, Rebecca attempted to reason with him, but he was unable to control his rage. Staff eventually had to step in and gently urge Daniel to go back to their villa so he could calm down. The couple's exit from the pub was seen on the resort's CCTV cameras as the evening drew on. Daniel was seen in the video leading Rebecca away while maintaining a firm hold on her arm. Her posture was stiff, her steps hesitant, but she did not resist. Rebecca was last seen alive at that time. The sun rose over Fiji the following morning, bathing the serene resort in its golden glow. However, something unimaginable had happened inside their villa. The guy she had thought would be her eternal love would soon be at the focus of an inquiry that would expose the evil hiding behind their flawless facade, and Rebecca Keller, the intelligent, imaginative woman who had once dreamed of a storybook romance, would never wake up again. Anger, fear, and desperation were all evident in the events that transpired on the evening of March 9, 2013, and the early hours of March 10, 2013. The horrific last minutes of Rebecca Keller's life, a series of violent events that exposed the full scope of Daniel Keller's internal conflict, were pieced together by forensic evidence. Like many nights on their honeymoon, it had started at the villa, but the tension from their fight at the bar had followed them back. Rebecca withdrew into the bedroom, perhaps fatigued and attempting to avoid more confrontation. She eventually took cover in the bathroom, locking the door after herself. Later, forensic specialists discovered dents and scratches surrounding the door handle, which were unmistakable indications of an attempt to pry it open. Daniel broke the door down in a fit of wrath, splintering the wood near the lock. The events that followed were both tragic and vicious. Daniel's rage became unmanageable. In his hands, a bottle of champagne, likely intended for a love toast, became a weapon. According to the investigation, he hit Rebecca so hard that the bottle broke as it hit her, leaving glass fragments all over the restroom floor. Analysis of blood splatter revealed a disturbing account of the assault. Patterns on the floor and walls revealed Rebecca's desperate attempts to defend herself from the blows, but she was unable to do so. Rebecca was hit more than once. She was probably startled by the initial punch, making her open to the subsequent blows. Daniel's anger appeared to be focused and unyielding based on the force, angle, and impact. Later, forensic specialists saw that the extent of her injuries suggested she had crumpled against the chilly bathroom floor tiles after a few hits. She had been fatally traumatized, as evidenced by the pooling of blood around her skull. Amid the confusion, the broken champagne bottle was lying with blood on its sharp edges. Tiny glass fragments were discovered embedded in Rebecca's skin, serving as a heartbreaking reminder of the abuse she had to undergo. Items from the bathroom were scattered about her, including a ripped shower curtain and a knocked-over soap dish, suggesting a short but fierce struggle. Investigators learned more about the man responsible for the brutality as they pieced together the scene. Although Daniel Keller's life had always appeared to be successful and well-maintained, he was actually burdened by a difficult past. According to psychological studies, Daniel had been raised in an unstable home. He had a strong fear of rejection because of his father, who was a strong and frequently violent character. Daniel had to deal with a tumultuous atmosphere because his mother, although caring in her own way, had battled with her own mental health. Those closest to Daniel, including former partners, had occasionally seen a peek of the darker side of his nature, but as he grew older, he learned to conceal his concerns with charm and confidence. Unrestrained rage, possessiveness, and a need for control were characteristics that frequently emerged under stressful or conflictual situations. Daniel had never used violence before, but his incapacity to handle emotions of betrayal or inadequacy had always been a warning sign. Daniel's fury that night was not premeditated, according to the inquiry into Rebecca's death. This was the result of years of unresolved anger and control issues rather than a premeditated act of violence. Rebecca's attempt to hide in the restroom probably caused a sense of rejection that Daniel could not stand. He saw her closing the door as a sign of disobedience and a threat to his power. Even he might not have predicted how the storm of emotions, jealousy, rejection, and anger exploded. The magnitude of what had transpired started to dawn on everyone when the fighting subsided and the villa was quiet. However, it was too late. In the same location where they had come to celebrate their love, Rebecca, the lady who had once thought Daniel had the capacity for virtue, lay dead. The elegantly designed bathroom, which overlooked the tranquil seas of Fiji, had been turned into a crime scene. Investigators were faced with challenging questions due to the psychological intricacy of Daniel's behavior. How could such a successful and charming man be harboring such evil? How could a relationship that started out with promise and love have descended into such horrific violence? Rebecca's death was the tragic culmination of a lifetime of unresolved emotions and unregulated behaviors, not only the result of Daniel's actions that evening. It became evident that Rebecca's death was more than a temporary loss of control when the specifics of that night came to light. It was the terrible result of a man who was unwilling to face his inner demons, and whose fury destroyed the very person he professed to love. Everyone who knew Rebecca would be haunted by the heartbreaking and horrific story the evidence portrayed, leaving everyone wondering how such a bright light could be put out so viciously. 1.5 years after Rebecca's passing, on October 15, 2014, Daniel Keller's trial got underway. By that point, the case had already captured the attention of the world's media, which covered every aspect of it. The public was enthralled with the notion of a paradisiacal honeymoon becoming a murder scene, and they eagerly watched the trial to learn how such a terrible incident could have happened. On the first day, the courtroom was crowded, with media, legal professionals, and relatives of Daniel and Rebecca occupying the benches. Grace and Thomas Keller, Rebecca's parents, sat in the first row with grim, drawn features. In the past, they had been optimistic about their daughter's future and saw her living a happy, prosperous, and family-oriented existence. They were now present to witness the guy they had once accepted as their son-in-law being held accountable for her heinous murder. Daniel Keller was portrayed by the prosecution as a guy who was driven by a need for control and jealousy. They explained how, on that fateful night in Fiji, his possessiveness and insecurity had turned fatal. Beginning with the forensic examination of Rebecca's wounds and the broken champagne bottle, the evidence of the crime was presented with accuracy. The CCTV evidence, which was difficult to ignore, was emphasized by the prosecution. It showed Daniel pulling Rebecca back to their property following the argument at the pub. The resort's employees and other visitors, who recalled the tense discussions and Daniel's growing rage, testified about his unpredictable behavior during the honeymoon. The violence on March 9, 2013, appeared to be the culmination of this cycle. Under the direction of a renowned lawyer, the defense team attempted to change the story. They maintained that Daniel was too drunk to fully understand what he was doing the night of the murder. They hauled in psychologists to testify about his tumultuous history, describing the emotional wounds caused by a turbulent home and an abusive father. These witnesses said that Daniel's actions were not those of a cold-blooded killer, but rather those of a man overcome by years of unresolved pain, as he had battled feelings of rejection and inadequacy throughout his life. Instead than presenting the murder as a willful act of violence, the defense aimed to present it as an unfortunate, unexpected accident. These attempts failed to persuade the jury. The defense's arguments fell short of explaining the heinousness of Rebecca's murder, and the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its decision on November 5, 2014, finding the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. There was a range of reactions in the courtroom to the announcement. As the reality of the sentence set in, Grace and Thomas Keller held each other while they sobbed in silence. As the truth of his conviction set in, Daniel sat still, his face white. On November 19, 2014, 2 weeks later, the sentencing was conducted. Daniel was given a life sentence by the judge, who made it clear that he would be incarcerated for the remainder of his life. The sentence gave Rebecca's family a sense of justice, but it did not bring them any closure. Their daughter's passing was a wound that will never completely go away. Both families' lives were forever altered in the wake of the trial. Thomas Keller and Grace Keller turned their sorrow into activism. They started a campaign to spread the word about domestic abuse, speaking at events all around the nation and sharing Rebecca's experience. By encouraging people to identify the warning signs of abusive and controlling conduct before it was too late, they hoped to spare other families the suffering they had endured. In another sense, the aftermath was terrible for Daniel's family. His parents, James and Marilyn Keller, found it difficult to make peace with the man who had done such a horrible thing and the son they had known. The once proud real estate family's reputation was damaged when they were the focus of rumors and public scrutiny. In an effort to avoid the stigma associated with Daniel's crime, they moved to a more sedate town and distanced themselves from social groups. Nevertheless, despite their seclusion, they were burdened with guilt and grief, lamenting the passing of Rebecca as well as the son whose life had gotten so out of hand. Once a refuge for honeymooners and those seeking luxury, the Fijian resort gained notoriety as the scene of the tragedy. Bookings drastically decreased in the months after the murder, tarnishing its previously immaculate reputation. The villa where Rebecca died became a frightening reminder of the violence that had destroyed their ideal settings for the staff members who had been there that night. Some quit their jobs because they couldn't handle the memories, while others stayed in the hopes that the anguish would go away with time. Over time, Rebecca's story evolved into a warning. In documentaries and features, news organizations re-examined the case, examining the perilous dynamics of partnerships that seemed ideal. Rebecca's memory endured because her friends frequently talked about her bright personality, her generosity, and her aspirations for the future. There were unanswered questions that remained after the incident. Was it possible for someone to step in sooner? Before they departed for Fiji, were there any indications that Rebecca's life was in jeopardy? Most disturbingly, if Daniel had sought treatment for the rage and fears that had overtaken him, may her death have been avoided? The trial and its fallout served as a terrifying reminder of the evil that may lurk behind a flawless facade. What started off as a beautiful celebration of love turned into unfathomable heartache, leaving both families to live with the terrible fallout for the rest of their lives. Be sure to check out our next story and remember to like and subscribe for more updates on disturbing situations. A vicious murder results from a covert affair between the coach and the cheerleader. We would love to hear your opinions, so please leave a comment below.